There is no more identity, there are no more nations. There is no more meaning, and there is no more history. It's all been solved. We'll all be little citizens of our nation states that are effectively abstract entities that have no connection to history, and we'll all just buy stuff from the internet. That is the end of history. That is something that seemed almost plausible at some point in my life. But there comes a time when a people bites back. There comes a time when something, this undifferentiated individualist mass goes so far into nihilism, goes so far into the destruction of meaning and identity, that we have to pull ourselves out of it by the scruff of our own collar. You are given this black cloud that hangs over you. You're given this black cloud of slavery, Jim Crow. What is that black cloud but a guilt trip to weigh you down, to prevent you from achieving greatness, to prevent you from becoming something bigger than you are, to prevent you from embracing your family, to prevent us from becoming heroes, from re-entering history and changing the world and creating a new world in our image, a new world of beauty, a new world of power, a new world that's going to express what is in our soul. Not that black cloud that hangs over all of us, that black cloud of pain and sin and weakness. We have the power to embrace a new world that is the meaning of world history, that is our destiny of where we are traveling to a greater achievement of consciousness, a greater achievement of beauty, a greater achievement of power and intelligence and understanding of science. That black cloud is weighing us down. That black cloud is turning our world into a living hell. It is turning our world into a hell of unhappiness, of loneliness, turning our world into a world of death. You are a white person. You are part of the story of Europe. You have a deep connection with Rome. You have a deep connection with Athens. You have a deep connection with Byzantium, with this whole world that's been ripped away from you, and instead they substituted some disgusting bullshit football game.
Okay, and we are live. Welcome to the McSpencer Group, episode 1. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are right now. I am Craig Ainsley, and I'm joined today by Niels, and of course by Richard Spencer. We have 3 topics to cover today. We're beginning today what amounts to essentially a proof of concept. In other words, sort of a test run. The goal ideally is to get back up onto a more or less structured weekly podcast, similar to what was being produced before with alt-right politics. And that's where we'd like to go, but it's going to take some development. And we're just, instead of waiting until something is fully cooked, we just want to get off the ground and get going because there is a lot to discuss. And Richard, I've been hearing things. What do you think the chances are that we will hear from Don Camillo again?
Let's just say this. The chances are higher of Don Camillo's triumphant return in the next year than Jesus Christ's return in the next year.
I'll take it. So, I'll take it. Fantastic.
Both would be triumphant returns. Let's not diminish either one. But yeah, I do think that he will eventually come back to us. Anyway, we all deal with stuff, in our lives. So we need to get a great show going, and then Don Camillo will join us. But I have missed Don Camillo quite a bit, and I know that listeners have as well. So
absolutely.
I am holding out hope. But I have to say, I'm very happy to do this. This is a format which I really liked when I did it with Don Camillo and Gregory Conte, and we had some Hannibal Bateman would jump in, Evan would jump in, we would have guests. But it's not just me interviewing someone. It's a round table. I get to chime in. We get to bounce things off one another. I think it's my favorite format. So this is definitely something I want to build up.
Yeah, a lot of people have good takes. Richard has a lot of excellent takes, but if you don't kind of get a little bit of synergy going with other people,
exactly.
It's very lonely. It just doesn't come out the same way. And so this, I think, is ideal. And I really enjoyed Don Camillo as well. So hope we hear from him soon. So let's jump right into it. We witnessed on Friday another catastrophic event in Christchurch, New Zealand. By now, everybody certainly is super aware of the details. Actually, before I get started, by our technically oriented people, I was reminded to tell the audience that ideally you log into YouTube to listen to the stream, especially if you plan to donate at all. It makes it a lot more complicated to try and donate if you're not logged in. I don't know all of the technical aspects to that, but if you try to donate while not being logged into YouTube, it will be difficult. I may bring it up again. Yeah.
So when you go to if you want to donate for a super chat so that you will have your question or comment read on air, logging into YouTube on Streamlabs is key. Because for some weird reason, PayPal doesn't love free speech. And we need to look into that. But so we're not using PayPal, but we can process your donations. But you're going to have to log in.
Maybe it's time to just shut down PayPal until we have figured out what the hell is going on.
I agree.
All right, onward. On Friday in Christchurch, New Zealand, Brendan Tarrant entered, I believe, 2 mosques with 3 rifles and 2 machine guns in his car. The result, 50 dead, 50 wounded. He live streamed at least the first part of his attack. And he also released a 74 or 5-page manifesto dealing with his reasons for pulling this off. So it is going to be a difficult conversation. I think if bad faith people are listening to this, and we always have plenty of those very well-funded researchers who like to exploit everything we do and say to make us look as awful as possible. Our attempt is to talk about this seriously and really look into what it was Tarrant had to say. That's important. Especially if you are interested in kind of solving this problem or doing something at least to contribute to a solution. So that's what we aim to do. And, we're going to in a way allow him to play devil's advocate. What about his reasoning was at least cogent. And, what do we have to say about it?
How we can avoid such things in the future as well.
Right.
Is very important.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty obvious already that the media substantially is failing to do this. Although, as we were saying before we went live, Richard, it feels like the energy, and I think this is true of every event along this timeline, but the energy is a little bit different this time.
I think the energy is quite different, and we can talk about that. I mean, look, I'll say from the outset, I absolutely condemn violence. I have never nor would never involve myself in anything approaching what occurred in Christchurch. I've never been around anyone who's seriously suggested something like that. And if I were, I would turn them into the police. So I'll just say that from the outset. I absolutely do not condone violence. But we also, in a way, owe it to these people, much like to understand them and to think about them seriously and not think about them hysterically and so on. I wrote that about Dylan Roof in 2015. I said we owe Dylan Roof a few things, one of which is a fair trial, and that is to attempt to let the emotions to subside, to figure out the truth, and to serve justice in a rational and fair manner. And I think we also might owe him as well, besides the fair trial, we also owe him an understanding. That is to ask, why did he do this? What was his thought process? What was the context surrounding this act? And you know, on a historical and social basis, but even on a personal basis. And I think we should do the same thing to the Christchurch shooter.
I'll ask the panel up front. Richard, did you read the manifesto? Have you started looking at it yet? Okay,
I've read the whole thing.
Yeah, Niels, have you taken a look at it?
I've just read a few excerpts and gathered a lot of different takes from social media. Like he saw the climate change impact of unlimited migration, as well as just as much as a catalyst for his action than actual migrant crime and stuff like that. So it's just a multi-layered, excuse my language, clusterfuck, if you want to put it that way. And of course, immediately after the first reports went out, people were talking about this being a false flag. Even people that are, let's say, rather unradical, like Vox Day, for example. And I've seen criminal acts and murders like this that were also called out as false flags, that were not as easy to paint in this way like this was. I mean, obviously this guy or these two guys were trying to convert themselves into walking memes, like posting all this stuff, sending it out to the media and to politicians immediately before the whole thing, then live streaming it to Facebook, calling out to subscribe to PewDiePie before they start shooting, writing all this crazy stuff.
Yeah,
I'm not sure it was a false. I don't believe it was a false flag. I mean, I'm willing to countenance that thought, but that needs to be proven.
Yeah, sure. I'm just saying there have been murders and shooting sprees that were less crazy than this act that were called out as being false flags, and
right.
those were not immediately pushed into, or at least not as much pushed into a certain direction as this was. I mean, the media immediately checked out this guy's online footprint and what he wrote and what he obviously read and all this stuff. They are at least pretending to take everything literally that he wrote in this so-called manifesto. And of course, it's about the great replacement of populations. And of course, they are immediately tracing it back to the identitarian movement and to Renaud Camus, who coined the French base term for that. It's as I said, I mean, Guillaume Faye, rest in peace. It's just like a conversion of catastrophes, as he saw it, as well as a conversion of memes in these two shooters, because they were kind of just trying to turn themselves into avatars of 4chan or 8chan or what have you.
Right. I would say this: the manifesto is much more readable, and you could say rational or even insightful in some cases than anything I've read from similar violent actors. So I attempted to go through the Breivik manifesto, which was much longer, And I found it entirely unreadable. It was just massively autistic, and to the point that I simply couldn't follow it. It was unreadable. Dylan Roof's manifesto, if you want to call it that, struck me as a hastily written email. It was not something that he revised or put much thought or effort into. But the Great Replacement is something different. It was written. It was clearly revised. There was thought put into it. There was some kind of 4chan or 8chan memery going on where he was doing the copy pasta of what was it, the Navy SEAL kind of thing, and I do think that saying subscribe to PewDiePie and then talking about Candace Owens saying, I'm inspired by Candace Owens, but she's far more extreme than I am. I do think that was clearly a troll. It's interesting that he did not mention the identitarian movement. He didn't mention, Thank the Gods Me or David Duke or Jared Taylor or whatever. He instead mentioned Candace Owens. But that being said, he actually did make some arguments that you might see in a book by Guillaume Fay, or he's made arguments that you might see actually even among paleocons in terms of the, it's the beginning of the manifesto was it's the birth rates, it's the birth rates, it's the birth rates. It's effectively demography is destiny. Which I disagree with, by the way, but let's just leave it at that. That is an argument made by countless paleocons, by countless people in the alt-right, et cetera. I think it is an interesting case. I mean, we were talking about this before we went live, where he was making paleocon arguments of, there is no country in the Western world that has replacement level birth rates. Effectively, the declining white race is being replaced through immigration by people from all over the world, and including Muslims that have not just a kind of immigration experience, but have an invasion ethos or ideology of, we are going to come here. We are totally different than this modernist Christian society, and we are going to change their society into something that fits the ideals of the Quran. And he said a lot of things that I've heard for 20 years, to be honest, from neocons even. But I guess the fundamental difference is that he feels, I guess he's still alive, that there is no rational policy action that can be taken, that this is ultimately a war, and that there are going to be casualties in this war, and that we are not going to convince anyone. We simply need to act. And according to his strategy, that he was going to do this crazed meme-like action, live streaming using jokes. There was something absolutely surreal about the video. When I saw it, when I first saw the video, I thought, this cannot be real. This looks like a video game. This reminds me of one of, I don't play video games. This reminds me of one of those video games that I've seen people play, where the gun is in front of the screen and you're just going and blowing away.
There's actually a game from about 10 years ago, so I guess it's called Black or something like that, that was actually advertised as being sort of gun porn, because you have the usual first-person shooter perspective, and when you reload, the camera zooms in on your gun, so you can see the magazine popping out and the next one going in, and cocking and loading and all this stuff. And there are already, of course, rap music videos that use this sort of optic, because nowadays those cameras are as small, you can mount them in front of your chest and then walk around and hold a toy gun and stuff like that. So it's really hard to tell reality from some more or less good video production at this time.
he mentioned specifically the game Fortnite, which is along these lines. Which kind of goes back. We've teased that a little bit, but he was playing a very deliberate game with the media. He was trying to drive wedges and trying to excite the media in particular ways. I think we'll spend a lot of time there. But Richard, could you expand a little bit more? Because I actually think, we are, in a sense, arguing directly with Tarrant and saying, no,
Right.
this is not the way. But I think even within, the broader alt-right or kind of white racialist movement, I would suspect that the majority of people still hold the kind of what you've called paleocon view that you've just highlighted, that the whole issue is really driven by birth rates, and that's what we sink or fall on. So why don't you expand a little bit on?
We can talk about the birth rate issue. I mean, first off, I've never believed that demography is destiny. I don't discount demography. Obviously, nations must reproduce themselves in this continual line connecting past and future. And I don't deny that the family unit is the basis of this flourishing society. But at the end of the day, political power is destiny. When some Englishmen were meeting in London and they were effectively administering the entire Indian subcontinent, they weren't particularly concerned with birth rates. They actually understood themselves as controlling an entire population. And the fact that they were a dozen or so administrators, and they were, overseeing millions of people, did not bother them too much. So I'm not trying to totally dismiss demography. It's obviously incredibly important. But it is ultimately political power that determines destiny. If we had the right people in political power, if we had the right political system, there could be millions of say, non-whites in North America, and we could still unequivocally, firmly say that the future of our race is certain. Because we are guaranteeing the safety and the flourishing of our people. We know that we will have a future, and so on. But we're not in that situation. We are in a situation in which those who hold political power are sadistic and sociopathic, who are the people who hold political power actively destroying our race's future and our culture and so on. We are in a situation where it's not just the presence of non-white people. It is our own demoralization. It's our own black pill that within ourselves that is destroying us.
We seem to have what I've heard it called kind of a prolapsed identity, where we still have an identity, but it's turned back in on itself, which ends up being very toxic and poisonous.
It's a negative conception of ourselves. In this kind of, I was thinking about the Zonderweg thesis for German identity. Originally, Nils will probably correct me here because I'm not getting it exactly right, which is good. But
you did pronounce it right.
Okay, well, that's a start. The Sonderweg. The Zonderweg is the peculiar path into modernity of the German people. And it was originally a kind of liberal thesis of Germans entering the modern world, but in a way entering it in a different manner than, say, the English. So it was one that where there could be aspects of liberalism that were brought into Germany, but the Germans were doing it in their own way. They had a more rural culture. They had a culture that was connected to people and home. and they were going to kind of bring these other traditionalists, in some ways, Germanic elements into modernity. They were going to do it differently. The Sonderweg thesis, you could say, was kind of perverted in a way with National Socialism. It was this idea that the Germans the Germans took a peculiar path that was leading directly towards National Socialism. And in this kind of funny way, the post-war Germans in this ironical way, post-war Germans agreed with the Nazis. And they would say that, yes, all of German history from Luther to Bismarck, et cetera, was leading towards Hitler. We were on this peculiar path that led to Auschwitz, socialism. And so, in this weird way, they kind of adopted the German sense of identity, but adopted it in this ironic or profoundly negative and self-loathing manner. And I think that's something, there is white identity. Like Beto O'Rourke has white identity. He has acknowledged himself as white. But that identity exists only as a problem. It exists only as something that he needs to overcome himself, and that we need to overcome as a nation.
Yeah, would you say that the kind of the war on whites term, would you say that kind of hinders understanding? Because if you call it a war, it's something totally external, and there's no really internal problem. Whereas what you've been describing is a lot different psychologically and civilizationally.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with everything you said. I'm not sure what I would add. I mean, there is. I don't deny that there's a kind of war on whites going on. If we're with university admissions, everyone's talking about this scandal with celebrities, B-grade celebrities paying off administrators and so on. I find it all rather amusing, to be honest. But no, there's no question that universities, these admissions officers sit down, and whether they say this directly or not, they are basically saying, how can we have fewer white males in the next class? How can we expand diversity? How can we have more international students, more African American students, more Indonesian students than we had last year? And the same goes for Apple Computer or Microsoft or Goldman Sachs or et cetera. All these big institutions, or NASA or whatever, these big institutions are engaging in demographic replacement. That's clearly happening. It is explicitly happening in many cases. But so that's real. But the fundamental issue, and I think the more important issue, is that demoralization that is internal. And you see this expressed in a phenomenon like the White Death, the higher suicide rates, the opioid epidemic, higher rates of sleeping and TV watching and drunkenness and tattoos and et cetera. But you see this in even someone who's a very high functioning and affable, like Beto O'Rourke, in the sense that he acknowledges himself as a white person. You didn't see that from previous politicians. Bob Dole never said, "I'm a white man," or something. He acknowledges himself as a white man, but it's only a problem to overcome. So it's not like we're these white communities that are proud and we have our culture and our traditions and we have these little civic institutions we're all part of, and then this external world is against us and we need to fight against them. It's not like that.
Well, let's the demography is destiny attitude was kind of the jumping off point for all of that, and that really is the linchpin of Terrence's manifesto. So he doesn't deny all of this internal stuff. He says we have all of these maladies socially and spiritually and intellectually, and we have to overcome them. We basically have to doctor ourselves back into health. But because of the immigration issue, he says that we don't have time to do this, and so the timeline must be sped up.
Right.
And so that's his logic for this act. Now,
An accelerationism where he commits this violent act, and that the reaction to the act by the establishment will be so extreme and overdone that whites will either rise up, or there will be a kind of civil war that will break down. There'll be a massive gun grab in the United States, and that he will kind of push history forward.
Yeah, through the act and through this media strategy, which it may be the most worrisome thing to me about this entire affair, because it's not impossible at this point that a reckless terrorist is more agile in terms of media narratives than the entire institutional media itself. He made a very deliberate play to drive wedges and balkanize socially, but also in terms of all these media messages, and it seems like it may be working.
Though to put this into such a negative light, or at least I'm hearing some negativity out of this assertion, because at least over here I've read a lot of media coverage in which the given author was he started his comment by rambling on about the ineffectiveness of social media to blot out the output of this gunman as quickly as possible, so that no one would have been able to read his manifesto, to see that video, to gather any information from the perpetrator or perpetrators, him or theirselves. So the media narrative would be absolute, because media and government agency people would be the only ones with access to all information. And especially those media reports that immediately try to link this whole manifesto to identitarian groups and stuff like that, they were pretty eager to suppress any citation of this manifesto that would counter their narrative, because obviously they are already searching for data to amass the next few reports on other groups and call for action and stuff like that. So they are desperately trying to cling to their informational power, and they see social media, as long as it is kind of well played, if I may say so, by such perpetrators, as a threat to their sovereignty, to their media power, and their ability to determine what is supposed to be the truth and what's not.
Oh, you saw all of this. Don't say his name. Don't promote his manifesto. Don't listen to him, etc.
Yeah, that's what Ben Shapiro wrote.
Whereas, I mean, again, it's not letting him win by trying to rationally inquire into the situation. We want to understand why he did this. That's what any sensible, rational, and you could say even empathetic person would do, is let's get to the bottom of this. And the other option is to basically treat him as a lone wolf madman who had, like the Vegas shooter, just some weird antisocial kook who just started killing people. No one has any idea what that person's motive was year and a half ago, or Vegas. But actually, this shooter clearly had a motive. You can absolutely reject violence and still attempt to understand what he was attempting to do. But you have all of these people, from Ben Shapiro to the liberal lefts to actually Donald Trump, I believe, who said, don't say his name, don't listen to him. I
actually agreed. I unironically agreed with some of our unambiguous enemies when they pointed out to Shapiro and Trump and all these other people that, when it has to do with Muslim terrorism, you don't pursue that strategy at all. I mean, you go right into the biographical details. You go right into this awful jihadist philosophy. So I'm not on board with those people, but I was totally happy to observe them point out the hypocrisy of these establishment conservative figures trying to suppress inquiry into what Terrence's mindset was.
Very good point.
Terrence pinpoints the moment when he kind of turned and determined that he had to do something along these lines. He wrote in his manifesto that he was in Europe in 2017, and he highlighted two events: the terrorist attack in Stockholm that claimed the life of Ebba Åkerlund. He said that struck him in a very different way. Obviously, he had taken note of terrorist attacks in the past, but this one just emotionally resonated with him in a different way. And this was all at the same time, around the same time period, a little bit later in the month, the French presidential election unfolded. And you'll remember that Marine Le Pen was in this election against the now Saturnalian French leader. But he was.
I had so much hope for the Jupiterian emperor, but I have no hope for him now. He is in fact just a bankster shill.
Yeah, too bad.
All of his rhetoric was all for naught.
Yeah. But I was actually struck that Terrence really he didn't place any hope in Le Pen. He was beyond Le Pen. He regarded Le Pen as a milquetoast civic nationalist.
Right.
But he thought that at least she had a chance, and at least if France elected her, then maybe institutionally we were on a path that we could eventually fix things. Of course, that didn't happen, and a lot of people are saying that this was. A lot of people are describing him as black-pilled, or I've even heard some people who should know better say that his act was sudden and just kind of spontaneous. It may be kind of more black-pilling to outsiders to see that it was anything but. It was very deliberate. It was planned over a period of 2 years. It was very carefully orchestrated. And at least internally, it was kind of scripted and thought out, as we've seen. So he simply felt he had to do something. I mean, the way that I've kind of put this, to the panel before we went live, if he is right, then we are wrong. And I think that this is kind of important to point out from the standpoint of media people who want to say that people like us cause things like this, where it's really the reverse. If Tarrant is right, then there is no point having a stream. There's no point publishing a book. There's no point having a discussion. There's no point trying to build up an institution like NPI. It's all acceleration. So what do you think, Richard? I mean, to what degree are you worried that eventually people like Tarrant will basically kind of dominate the trajectory of things going forward?
Right. I mean, I sadly think people like Tarrant are going to be more and more prominent going forward, particularly due to the fact that we are being suppressed. We don't have a voice. It is very interesting that with Muslim terrorist attacks, you have all these conservatives like, Robert Spencer being, the no relation to me, being the most extreme or something, but all these people want to talk about how this is all based on the Quran and this is inevitable and this is what all Muslims do and all that kind of stuff. But the liberals generally say, well, there are some extremist Muslims there, and maybe there are some toxic mosques out there. But the answer to this problem is that we need to start a dialogue with the moderate good Muslims. and have this discussion. They need to be more prominent in our institutions, in the media, and we need to understand through them the claims, the outrage of some of these extremists, and we need to mediate that and work towards a better solution. But again, with someone like, say, me, as an example, the media was absolutely fascinated. You could say in love for a year and a half, where all they wanted to do was interview me and so on, and kind of point and sputter, or, I can't believe he said that, or isn't this crazy that you have a well-educated, good-looking young man supporting Trump and who's an active identitarian or white nationalist or whatever you want to call me. But that media fascination has been has dissipated to a great deal, but it's also was accompanied by a concurrent deplatforming of me, etc. I mean, the fact that we are having difficulty taking super chats right now is an expression of this. There has been a deplatforming of moderate voices. Jared Taylor was kicked off Twitter. We've all been expelled from PayPal and Stripe. We have extremely difficult times meeting in public when we announce it through as basically Antifa, or just given a kind of wink and are effectively tolerated by the system, and they make meeting in public almost impossible. So we've had the reverse of the situation. The rational thing to do right now on the part of the establishment would be to say, wow, the Christchurch shooter, this young man was disturbed. He's gone beyond morality. We obviously don't condone this. However, we need to understand where he's coming from. And there are moderate voices, like people who are clearly not violent, like Richard Spencer, who we need to start talking to and platforming. We need more speech, more dialogue at this point. But that is obviously not happening. I'm not being invited on, Meet the Press to discuss this and to say, well, we all condemn the Christchurch killing, but are there real claims from white identitarians that we need to listen to and dialogue about? That none of that's happening. So again, I hate to say this because it's almost like blackmail, but it's either him or me. You're going to deal with violent actors who feel like there is no way forward. There is no point at a stream. There's no point at an article. There's no point in a podcast. The only thing is violence. You're going to deal with those people, or you are going to grant expression to people like us. It is either him or me. And the way that Muslims were again, the way that the establishment dealt with the Muslim problem since 9/11 has been to amplify the voices of the moderate Muslims. The establishment is not doing this when it comes to identitarianism. They are not amplifying my voice at this point. They are trying to deplatform us. So they are basically making our way forward impossible. My way forward has always been to try to engage with the public as much as possible, to do the interviews, to go out in public, to use my real name, to speak openly about what I care about and what I believe. The establishment is making that more and more and more impossible every day that goes by. They don't want to hear from us. And again, I hesitate saying this, but it's one or the other. You're going to deal with people like me who do not commit violence, who want to talk with you, who are generally friendly, or you are going to deal with people who think that there is no way out, that there are no more arguments to be made, that we simply need to engage in violence to accelerate history.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Niels, do you essentially agree with that? I mean, does putting more figures like Richard or more voices kind of along our wavelength, making them more visible, making them more audible, does that take energy away from people like Terrence?
I guess it depends on what motive you try to make out for an act like this. Because on one hand, of course, there might be the eventual violent explosion due to a missing vent to let off steam, because people see there are problems that are not addressed by politicians, and they need to be solved, or maybe they can't be solved, and so everything goes down the drain, and sooner or later we will have a shit hits the fan scenario. So why not accelerate things so we don't have to suffer this any longer than it is absolutely necessary. On the other hand, I believe, especially as regarding all this media ping pong, those perpetrators, or the main perpetrator we're talking about, seem to like to play. I believe this is some weird sort of projection of seemingly rather powerless individuals into the matrix, if you want to call it that, the simulation, because I believe it's a very white thing to do stuff like that. I mean, okay, I digress here, but maybe some of you will remember this guy who live streamed himself painting his face black and then shooting himself in the head as an adoration to the singer Björk, or the guy who also strapped a GoPro cam to his chest and then went on to shoot this TV reporter live on camera. I believe that was also a white guy, but I might be mistaken. It's some total deformed postmodern version of this 15 minutes of fame meme that Andy Warhol put out back in the 70s, I believe it was. Like, those people feel that their life is so pointless, and there are no more things to aim to, that they just want to be immortalized in the media, even if they have to create their own media to do so, as those live streamers tend to do.
Or Sky King.
Yeah,
the young man in Seattle. Yeah,
that's pretty much a prime example. And back in the old U-turn days, you guys kind of perpetuated this meme, because it was, a one of quote unquote our guys that produced himself, and this will harm anyone, actually, which is I guess the best turnout this whole thing could have had, save for him landing without killing himself, but then probably he would be serving jail time now and what have you. I guess we have to determine, or at least say what's more probable. Was there a real political motive for this, or were those two guys just goofballs, crazy people who kind of took political terms and some memes they found online as fake reasons for their actions, kind of like Anders Breivik was actually also hard to determine whether or not he actually believed in anything. Right. He copy-pasted from some counter-jihadist online blogs and compiled this giant pile of paper from that. I guess there is a large portion of this whole weird behavior and the notion that pretty much all of this isn't right in one way or the other stems from the fact that it is just it's actually just like an action movie or a a computer game, and actually those people seem to believe that they are in some sort of Born Identity sequel or stuff like that, where they can commit a certain act and by doing so crush the whole system or start some domino reaction, just like the NATO-fed right-wing terrorist groups in Italy, for example, in the 70s and 80s, more or less on their own tried to do by committing terrorist acts. They bombed certain public spaces and killed a few hundred people. And it seems like they wanted to make everyone believe that leftist terrorist groups did this so that the government would crack down on the leftists and the people would call out for a more autocratic government. So in the end, they would be able to reinstall some sort of proto or quasi-fascist authoritarian leadership. On the other hand, all of this is kind of spoiled by the fact that all of these groups were pretty much financed by NATO due to the Stay Behind network project. But this is actually what the 4D chess a lot of people in the US have been talking about ever since Trump was elected looks like. You do something to make the media and the political case react in a certain way so that there will be tension building up. This whole thing is actually called strategy of tension, and a lot of pundits regarding terrorism, like Walter Laqueur, for example, wrote about this. Tension will eventually build up, and then sooner or later the system you despise will collapse, and hopefully a system you believe that would be better for the people will replace it. The only question is, do people really think this far, or is this all just a meme in and of itself and some weird media spin on more or less random acts of violence?
Well, we'll see. I don't think it's a tragic topic, so I don't think it lends itself well to kind of a cute exit question. But Richard, I'll give you the last take before we move on to the next topic. Is there anything before we move on that that you'd like to express along these lines?
I think I've said it all. I mean, we are. Look, I don't want to. It's not me. I don't want to engage in anything like this, and it is incumbent upon us to force ourselves into the mainstream. Again, it in a better world, the mainstream would be looking to people like me and saying, "Let's hear from the moderate ones." But I don't think that's going to happen. It might happen again. We might have a 2016, 2017 thing happen again, maybe in 3 or 4 years, but it's not going to happen in the foreseeable future. But it's really incumbent upon us to bring ourselves into the mainstream and to continue to engage with the public. Because again, it's either the Christchurch way or it's our way.
Well, the next topic, and I believe
let's do this actually. Sure. Sorry, before we do that, I need to take a 1-minute break. And so I'm going to turn off my camera, but why don't you read, we have a couple of super chats. So why don't you read those real quick while I'm taking a break.
Well, I've got to locate them. So here, let me do a little.
They're on the side. On the group chat.
Right. I'm trying to move up. Aha. Yeah, but from my view, I'm not able to see who has done a super chat. So let me do some clicking. And Niels, if you are able to see, then let me know. We might have Richard. Address this when he comes back.
I could actually read them out if you want me to.
Testing.
Do that, because for some reason I'm not.
I can read them if you guys need me to.
Yeah, go ahead. Read them, and if there's something that I'll take notes, or maybe just respond directly if there's something that.
Oh, okay. So the first one is from Ludovici for $10. Thanks so much, Richard. Have you noticed that the fighting has subsided the past week? I'm really happy about all the good energy lately. It feels like 2016 energy again. Goodbye to infighting. Hail victory. So we'll just wait for Richard to come back for that one.
All right.
Yeah, I'm reading
Richard,
I'm reading the Streamlabs. Unless you want to read them, Richard.
Yeah, the first one was about infighting and that we're getting back. Yeah, it is interesting. 2018 was just a overall bad year for everyone, and the movement was post Charlottesville. The movement was divided, and it was not a let 1,000 flowers bloom type division, which could have been productive. It was a let's cease communication, let's attack one another. We have all these other people who are so toxic, and we just need to move in this way. It was absolutely divisive. It went nowhere. Nothing was accomplished. I mean, I don't think any of these people, the American nationalists, I mean, what are they going to point to in terms of what they've accomplished? Their predictions were wrong. Their strategy, their predictions are laughably wrong. Their strategy has been debunked. I mean,
Hey, Richard, before you continue,
reality.
it sounds like your volume, at least to the outside world, maybe a little bit low. So.
Oh, okay. Let me
adjust
turn
that.
up the gain a little bit.
You sound fine to me, but everyone's reporting that your volume needs to be up.
I've turned up the gain, so let's see what happens with that.
Great. So basically, you're saying that 2018 was pretty divisive and not productive, and the
massively. We were able to present ourselves as a force and actually as an independent force. I remember in April of 2017, just a little under 2 years ago, after Trump's strikes against Syria, I called up Mike Enoch and I said, well, let's go protest Trump in front of the White House. And within 48 hours, we were doing just that. It was absolutely remarkable, the kind of coordination. I don't think anything like that is possible in the foreseeable future, and we know the reasons why.
Now we're hearing that the audio is completely gone, no sound.
Really?
Yeah. Good now, back now. We're being accused of boomer tech level abilities.
I don't know what's happening here.
I fixed it. It was gone for just a second. It's back now, and just trying to fix the audio.
Great.
All right.
Now the gain is too high.
We blame the millennial Zoomer and not the boomers. No boomers on this podcast, but right. And I think in some ways Trump has had to fail for us to kind of get back together again. I think the ubiquity, the unanimity even of Yang Gang is interesting. It's been basically Trump has had to fail for us to come together as a movement.
Well, that's going to lead so seamlessly into our next topic. Do we have any other super chats that we want to get to before we move there?
Yeah, we have a few more.
Okay.
All right, let's read them out.
Okay, so the next one is from Geo Gentile fan. He says, all right, they should be able to donate. Oh, I'm sorry. It says, did you see the egging of Australian Senator Fraser Anning? What was your response?
He responded proportionately. So I don't know if everyone's seen this. I saw a video of it on Twitter where a kid egged a politician. I don't even know. I know next to nothing about Australian politics, so I don't know what's going on. But I'm just imagining it was a left-wing kid who egged a right-wing politician, and he punched him in the nose. But in my view, that is an entirely proportional response. If someone egged him,
the Anning apologists are saying that he open face slapped him. It was unclear to me from the video. The first strike looked a little bit more like an open face strike to me. The second one, I wasn't so sure.
Right. But, again, if someone eggs you and you pull out a gun and kill them, obviously that is not proportional, and it's outrageous. But if someone assaults you, I mean, hitting you on the head with an egg, that's an assault, and you pop them in the nose, and I don't really see a big problem here. I mean, maybe it's just me.
Niels, are you going to be a child abuse apologist here?
I mean, remember that eggs might carry salmonella, so they might actually be considered biological weapons. And I mean, maybe just being cliched here, but I guess if in the US someone would step up to a politician right behind him and raise his hand and make a move to his head, he would be pretty blessed not to be shot on sight by the Secret Service or something like that. So I guess taking a blow to the face is appropriate for such a dashing act of youthful energy.
Do we have another super chat?
We have a couple more. Lechlon says, "Remember, lads, subscribe to PewDiePie, $10.55. Mary Smith says, for $14.88, "I'm barely awake because it's Sunday a.m. in California, but wanted to say thank you for the show." That's all we have for right now.
All right. Thank you, Mary.
All right. Well, we already went there a little bit. The Dionysian energy, as Richard's called it, the meme magic is now coalescing again around a new figure, a new hero emerges, Andrew Yang. And Richard, I know you talked a little bit, actually a lot about him with JF on the public space, but there's more there, and we do have some stragglers in the alt-right. We do have some people in the racialist movement who aren't ready to come along, and I think some of them have. I mean, there are good anti-Yang takes out there. There are reasonable concerns, obviously. I mean, up front, Yang is obviously not our guy. He is not one of us. He is not a white nationalist, and although
or
he has
even a populist or or even
Exactly.
Trump of 2016, a kind of conservative populist talking to the heartland. Yeah. Or is he in a kind of funny way?
Sure. Yeah. So I tuned in when you were talking with JF. I've been participating in some of the discussions. I've been kind of observing what's going out online. I would say the most kind of uncompromising take against Yang arising from people who are aligned with us is to point out simply that he has some pretty terrible planks from our point of view. As far as immigration goes, he's in favor of a path to citizenship. He doesn't really seem yet to have, even though he's got an engineering mindset and should be able to figure this out. He hasn't really gotten to acknowledging that you can't have UBI, you can't have the freedom dividend, and invite the entire world at the same time. He wants to make Puerto Rico the 51st state. And I've seen it expressed out there that a lot of these policies put in place would basically bring us to what amounts to a South Africa situation very, very quickly. So, Richard, what do you say?
I think there are some good anti-Yang takes out there, but I would push back against a lot of what you've just said, in the sense that in terms of Puerto Rico, I don't think that's happening. In terms of a path to citizenship or amnesty, I think we're going to probably get that through Republicans. And unlike Republicans, who are radically cutting Medicare and Medicaid in their budget that they've just proposed, Yang does not want to do that. He wants to help out a lot of struggling white people with these programs, and he wants to give everyone $1,000. That includes people right now suffering from the opioid epidemic, etc. I agree that Yangism is a kind of act of desperation. It is I think I tweeted out, MAGA was the fantasy that America could be saved and we could return to the 1950s and all have picket fences and so on. Yangism is the awareness that it can't. And we are, whatever you want to say about UBI, UBI is an interesting proposal. It is a radical proposal that is politically not feasible at the moment, actually. But it is just as radical as a lot of our fantasies about Trump. And there are many right-wingers who have supported UBI, Charles Murray being the most prominent, not Thomas Friedman, the other, Milton Friedman.
Milton, yes.
Right. Has supported a kind of version of UBI from the negative income tax, basically, that was proposed in the mid-century. So there are people who are on the right who have supported this. It's a policy in itself that should be debated and discussed. But the Yangism as a meme internet phenomenon is coming from an act of desperation. It is coming from Trump's failure. It is a acknowledgement that this just isn't going to work. Trump was not a paradigm changer. He is just a conservative, and I just want my $1,000. And I get that. And I think that's in a way, psychologically, a good thing psychologically. And it actually is an act of maturity, believe it or not, because it is, we are dispensing with the conservative fantasies about Trump. And we are acknowledging in a realistic manner the dire straits that we are in. So I do think Yangism is an overall positive phenomenon. Is Yang our guy? No. Is there a kind of populist nationalism to Yangism and UBI? I would say yes. The fact is, if our ideology is libertarian individualism, then there are very few legitimate, coherent arguments that you can make against immigration. Basically, if all this country is a space for lone wolves and maybe families to come and make money, then why are we stopping immigrants from coming? I mean, it's not coherent. But if being a citizen really means something, if you have a birthright as a citizen to social programs, to entitlements, etc., then you can start making coherent arguments against immigration. The fact is, these statist regimes in France have also given birth to a nationalist right that is a statist nationalist right, as the Front National is. In the United States, the right has been hyper-libertarian, hyper-liberalism, effectively, individualism. And so there is a nationalist quality to UBI. UBI is not actually universal in the sense that everyone on the planet would be receiving this freedom dividend. It would be for U.S. citizens. Your citizenship would really mean something. And when we argue against immigration, we would basically say that there are 1 million newcomers coming in this year, and that means 1 million times 1,000, which is $1 billion. That is $1 billion a month of UBI that we are going to be paying out. There is a direct, immediate, incontestable cost to immigration. So I think there is a nationalist quality to Yangism and UBI.
So I have more takes that I want to get, but Niels, why don't I give you an opportunity? Just overall, what's your impression of Andrew Yang?
I believe he's kind of the replacement for Tulsi Gabbard for all the disappointed right wingers out there, at least on Twitter and from what I've gathered elsewhere. You know, the basic problem of all those political processes is even in the most basic democracy, people will still need a leading figure to look up to put their hopes
Right.
on, and to concentrate their political energy on, given they even have something like that. And I'm not that good in economics, so I I won't pretend to have that much of a take regarding this. But the question of UBI, even if usual conservatives and people who would consider themselves right wingers usually would shy away from that or start screeching about socialism and stuff like that, is let's just for a second forget the immigration issue. Richard already said that he doesn't believe that that population growth or decline is the solution to any problem and the problem itself. That is because I guess Richard is one of the few right-wingers who believe in progress and do not shun progress. And if we want to accept that perspective, it is just the case that robotics and automation will kill millions of jobs throughout the West within a decade or a generation maximally, and people will need a perspective to continue living and to live peacefully. Like UBI serves a major pacifying function when the perspective for them is unskilled labor, their unskilled jobs taken away by robots. And that is something UBI might be absolutely necessary for in a few decades or one or two generations. The problem with immigration is that it undermines the whole system. Something like UBI might actually work if we could disjoint the actual economical growth from and just I mean, it's being ridiculous at this point, but just imagine something like this Star Trek world where pretty much all manual labor is done by robots and androids, and there is no more money or currency, and people just push a button on a replicator and get their food. Something like that would probably actually be paradise, given the perspective that jobs will fall flat en masse within. I guess we will even live to see it. And yeah, besides leaving those people out there to starve, something like UBI might eventually be the only solution.
I think it's safe to say that if it's not the only solution, it really is the only one that's been offered. It's
Right.
the only one that anyone has presented. So anyone, you know, I've looked at some of these MAGA message boards and people, you know, people on Fox, oh, this is socialism, blah, 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 this is redistribution. Okay, what are you going to do with millions and billions of people who have already been put out of work, who have exited the workforce, are no longer accounted for in unemployment statistics? Look at all these social problems that we have. And I think Yang has a very good way of putting it. We are in a 9-inning game, and we are in the third inning. And the third inning has given us Donald Trump, and it's given us all this turmoil. Do you just want to keep playing on this strategy that you adopted, or do you at least want to try something else? And I think that's a good buy-in. So, you know, Richard, on the public space and elsewhere, I think you know, you were kind of acknowledging that, wow, look, if we didn't even have the political capital to get a wall built, you know, put some mortar together and bricks and build a wall, we couldn't do it. This looks, you know, frankly impossible. UBI would mean an enormous turnabout in our social welfare system and our entitlement system and just our way of thinking overall. It seems like chances of actually getting that are slim to none. So I'll step out of
Right,
my
and let's point this out. UBI is a radical reformation. It is a wholesale, not even a reformation. It is a wholesale replacement of the welfare state. UBI does not stack. That what and Andrew Yang has said this. What this means is that we can't have all of these overly complicated welfare programs and UBI. UBI will replace that. There will be no welfare system as we know it. And it will be so radically simple. It is a direct deposit to your bank account that a massive amount of bureaucrats will be displaced. And they don't like that. They don't, they don't want to hear that. So this would be a new paradigm. I mean, this is Andrew Yang, whatever you want to say about him, he is clearly the most radical politician there is now. I mean, Donald Trump is not offering a new paradigm. Neither is anyone else. This is, outside of, say, the Communist Party or something like that. Andrew Yang is offering something radically different. It would probably demand, I mean, Charles Murray suggested that the UBI would demand constitutional amendments. We would have to get behind this as a nation. This would have to be a left-right thing going forward.
Well, knowing all of this and kind of looking forward, understanding that this is the case, and it's very unlikely that we would be able to obtain this, even and especially if Yang gets elected. The question becomes why put the energy into him and why support him? Let me step out of like a quasi-moderator role and kind of offer a take, and then
Sure.
the panel can vote up or down. We had a similar kind of energy that developed around Donald Trump in 2015 and 2016, and it was very exciting. It was a lot of fun. It was youthful, and it really kind of changed the game from our perspective. It was a lot of fun to be involved in. It dissipated. Things were bad. It's coming back. What you've called a kind of Dionysian energy. And there is, I think there is a reason to simply go there, to go where it is, to be involved. Now, going forward, moving forward in 2015 and 2016 into 2017, I think you'll probably agree that the mistake that was made by a lot of people who were in or around or connected to the alt-right was, to fail to criticize Donald Trump and his administration. When he started to appoint some really lousy people, when he started to betray his platform, and when he just stopped committing himself to America first, that was a moment when we could have again kind of maximized our influence. Punched up very, very strongly from our small numbers and small institutions. Really could have sent a signal to say, we don't stand for this. We move away from this. We object, and we failed to do that, and that was a lost opportunity. And I think we were lost for a long time. Let's imagine a timeline where Yang gets into office, and Yang is stymied by the deep state, by gridlocked government, by unimaginative and corrupt politicians. And he's not able to do this. That would, in some ways, perhaps be another opportunity for us to say to object. Instead of stringing this along and having months and months of takes where it's like, well, UBI is coming. It's just a game of underwater backgammon. We're almost there. It'll really happen. No, instead, maybe this time when it doesn't happen, I don't want to sound like a political speculator, but do you think maybe this that we could play this differently this time, and maybe game the media conversation to our advantage in a different way this time around?
I think we would, because there wouldn't be the emotional investment in Yang in the way that there was with Donald Trump, because Yang is he's idiosyncratic candidate to be sure. He's an Asian nerd, and I don't say that as an insult or a slur. You know, he just is who he is. With Donald Trump, there is this sense, and I heard this was spoken to me quite directly and explicitly by people, which is that Donald Trump has connected with Midwestern and Southern whites directly. They love him. For us to oppose him would be us to oppose them. And we just can't do it. And I basically responded, but we have to, because we want to lead these people. We aren't fans. We are leaders. With Yang, I think it would be much easier to basically, you know, again, go to where the Dionysian energy is, kind of try to point out that this isn't just some random phenomenon, that this is actually really important. It's expressing something that we want to bring out, the kind of metapolitical aspects of this. But I don't think there will be the emotional connection to Yang of, you know, trust in Yang. Yang's one of us. He's our guy. You know, I don't think that it would be like that. And that's how we're going to have to operate as a dissident movement. We're going to be opposed to a lot of, say, Midwestern and Southern whites. We're going to be opposed to Middle America at some point. We're going to have to accept that as a dissident movement. And we're going to, but we also don't want to just curl up into our shell and not have any connection to the public or to the political sphere. We do want to go where the energy is when it can serve our purposes. I think a lot of the alt-right, the American nationalist strategy, where it was like, oh, we're not alt-right, we hate the alt-right, let's denounce Richard Spencer or whatever, and let's just pretend that we're conservatives. I thought that was all just a very bad energy. That was leading absolutely nowhere. It was taking us backwards. It was harming our ideological commitments. But I don't see that with Yangism.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, Niels, I have a distinctly German question for you. Are you willing to?
Well, please remember that. No,
I
just kidding.
don't know how much you know about Yang, the man, and his background. But are you willing to agree? Are you willing to view Yang as the candidate of Spenglerian despair?
I kind of get what you're hinting at. Personally, I would say from an outsider's perspective, Yang as well as Trump, back when he decided to run for presidency, were people like this are freaks within the system. Not meant as an insult, but they just represent the most extreme exception from the usual kind of businessman, like interchangeable, universal, globalist type of politician within the US. And in being a strange, hyper-rich businessman with some pretty boyish behavior every now and then, as well as Richard put it, being an Asian nerd is kind of like being American in a certain way, being a US guy, America, yeah, instead of being like Hillary Clinton or Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan or what type of mainstream politician have you, being just a streamlined, pretty faceless, bland type of character that could be a politician in the US as well as in Australia or in the UK or anywhere all over the globe. And I believe people who would who agree that the system might be flawed to a degree that it is not. It is FUBAR, you know, would actually vote for such people, as well as they over here in Europe vote for satirical fun parties like the Pirate Party in various European countries, or the Five Star Movement, the Movimento Cinque Stelle in Italy, who nobody believed that they would actually vote them into government, but people are fed up in a way that they see electing such parties into government is the only way they can do something and voice their anger and their resentment and their disappointment. They could also not vote at all, but that would be contradictory to their conviction that democracy is overall good and they should exercise their citizen rights to elect the government and stuff like that. So I guess it's all about voicing a moralist dissident opinion, but within the realms of the game, of the system. And by using this potential, those people who are willing to focus on people like Trump before he actually was elected into office, and now Andrew Yang, or maybe also Tulsi Gabbard and what have you, in some satirical way and in a desperate way also, perhaps, those people are the audience for a stream like this, and for books that WSP puts out, and for all those blogs we know. Those are the people we should focus on. It does not matter really what current political figure they look up to, but it's their more or less deliberate voice of disappointment and dissidence that they want to be heard, and that dissident media should catch up with and concentrate and funnel this fire.
I'll just sum up that. I mean, as opposed to attempting to appeal to goofball conservatives who vote straight Republican and have this ideology, etc., why don't we appeal to 50% of the population that doesn't vote? And that, yeah, maybe out of laziness to a degree, maybe out of disconnection to a degree, but maybe out of absolute frustration and cynicism to a large degree. That, maybe as a dissident movement, we need to tap into that energy as opposing to tap into the Fox News audience that thinks we're winning right now, that thinks things couldn't get better under Trump. And this is a new move, and I think it's a much better move, and it's a move that's much truer to who we are.
Yeah, I'll upvote all of that. So, it was a lot of good takes there, and it seems like, there's a possibility that Yang can definitely have this kind of, sensibly desperate view, maybe I'll call it, projected onto him. Richard, you seemed on Twitter like you were going to go a bridge further, and you think he himself maybe actually has some of this attitude, kind of this, Spenglerian arc of civilization kind of mentality in him.
I think he does, because, this is a big subject. I remember Rick Santorum once said that in America, everyone's middle class. And there is this conservative fantasy that there won't be working class consciousness, and there won't be elite consciousness as well. That even if we have different bank accounts, we'll all kind of be one culture together, a suburban American megachurch goofball culture. It will be one nation, effectively, as more or less affluent middle class people. I think Yang, and to a very large degree the alt-right, and to a very large degree the left, not the Hillary Clinton left, but the Chapo left, etc., the Michael Tracy left. We are the majority report left, the Young Turk left to a degree. We recognize these big structural problems in this country, that we're not going to all be middle class, there was a period of time in the mid 20th century where one could plausibly say that poverty will simply be eliminated, that everyone will have a job from the age of, say, 25 until 65, and that, yeah, we'll have different abilities and different luck, different opportunities. Some of us will make bad decisions, but we'll kind of all be in this together as one, 200 to 300 million middle class society. As we move forward into the 20th century, fewer and fewer people will plausibly say that. That is a fantasy. That is not happening. We have rates of disability in the United States that are approaching, third world countries. We have more people are working than ever before, as Donald Trump said. More people are not working. More people are on disability. More people have checked out. More people have stopped seeking work than ever before. And this is going to intensify. And
that's,
it is
that's
not
what you just said. Not to interrupt, but Yang's willingness simply to put that in people's faces and say, GDP is a bogus measure. And a lot of the measures that could be good measures, maybe unemployment could be a good measure, but it's
calculated correctly, which
the books are cooked. I mean, this is why I'd like someone to fact check me on this, but I do know that Trump attacked Obama for basically allowing the Labor Department to cook the books in terms of labor and employment statistics. But I don't see where he ever went back and fixed them. So he's using the same cooked books to go and say, unemployment. This economy is growing at a dizzying pace. This is the best. We're the best ever. Blah blah blah. So yeah, all of these numbers are terrible, and just rates of social pathology. All of the things that people like Murray and Putnam have been talking about for a long
divorce
time.
rates. Like what are these rates that we should be using? Divorce rates. That actually says something. Affordable family formation, that says something. Indebtedness, that is a rate that we should be talking about. How many millennials are able to get out of student loan debt? That should be a rate we should just be simply talking about. One's access to a public park. Just real simple things like this. How many times per week are you able to go and throw a frisbee with your kid, or maybe with your dad or something like that? Those are rates that we should be talking about, not the stupid Dow Jones Industrial Index, which is a bunch of global hedge funds and boomers and their 401k. That's meaningful to them. It's all paper. It's all meaningless. It's negatively correlated with happiness in a way. I mean, we Yang has talked about we should do this, but the reason why I said that Yang's vision comes from despair is that Rick Santorum fantasy that everyone in America is going to be middle class is increasingly implausible. And Yang recognizes this. He recognizes that these jobs aren't going to come back, that mid-century fantasy will never materialize, and that we're going to actually, through automation, through technology and robotics, and maybe even through cultural despair, we're going to have to deal with the fact that there are going to be many people who aren't working. There are going to be many people whose middle class dreams are going to be squashed and will never materialize. And that we need to face this reality and actually offer something in order to maintain social stability and cohesion. He's one person willing to say it. No one else, no other politician will say it. Everyone else believes in the American dream, except one Asian nerd.
Yeah, I guess we had to hire Chinese and have an outsider come in and audit our society and just tell us how it really is. I don't really have a substantial exit question here, unless there's anything. I'm sorry.
I have a good exit question.
Oh, you do? Okay.
No, I think okay. Do you think Yang is a flash in the pan, and that a month from now Yang will be at zero and not going anywhere? Or do you think that Yang is going to be a force in the debates and that basically people are going to be forced to talk about him, and that UBI is going to become a kind of meme in the Democratic Party.
Well, I'll Richard, maybe you'll answer last. I'll go first. His trajectory is already pointed strongly upward, so we know that. We know that a lot of these Democratic candidates are just they're just propped up, cardboard corporate cutouts like Kamala Harris, and they just all they offer is the same old bullshit, boilerplate. To know whether Yang can last for the long haul. I think UBI and I think all of the kind of proposals and memes, the fundamentals in terms of his message are great. And I would actually push back a little bit on, some of this talk, between you and JF saying he's a terrible politician. I mean, there's not a whole lot of charisma coming directly from him, but he definitely is able to let it play off of him. So there's that little video where he's sitting with two other Asian or Chinese guys, and he says to the camera, America, you are getting fucked, and why don't you help me unfuck you? And the other two guys on camera just start laughing. They didn't expect that from him. So yeah, he's basically a nerd, but I think there is kind of a hipness there. So I think he can keep going. I think he can really give a real push. The thing is, a presidential campaign is enormously straining. He's a family man. I don't know a lot about, something as elementary as how his wife feels about this. I mean, it's got to be, and the more of a challenge that he presents, the more difficult it will get, the more aggressive and nasty, the media and all of these other forces will become. So, I think the possibility is there, and I hope that he keeps going. What do you think, Niels?
Since U.S. election cycles have a completely different procedure than those of European states in terms of the candidates first, and everyone has basically has to drum up his own, especially financial support for himself. I don't dare to predict anything, but I believe that his convictions that he has uttered so far are that far out from the perspective of his own party that they will look for and eventually find measures to keep him down. And if they don't, well, the next pre-elections and the process will show whether or not he will be able to amass the amount of support he needs to pull through with this. And personally, without wanting to go out on a limb here, I doubt that he will make a difference in one way or the other in the end.
What do you say, Richard?
Well, that might be true. I'm not predicting his victory, but I believe that we are not at the end of a Yang moment, in the sense that there's been a kind of almost 2-week, you could say, Yang gang phenomenon on the internet, where people are getting excited and wearing hats, and the alt-right supports him, and the 4chan meme artists are creating things for him. I don't think this is the end of that little moment. I think this is the beginning of a much bigger phenomenon. Now, will he win? Most likely not. But does this Yang gang have legs? I would say almost assuredly so. I do think that he is going to be a force that is disruptive, that is at the very least highly annoying to the liberal establishment, and they are going to have to address it. They are going to probably and that what is that cliche? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. I don't think he's going to win, but we've passed the ignoring stage, and we're at the laughing/fighting stage. We probably haven't seen the fighting stage yet. I've not seen any nasty attack at him, but those will come. But he is going to be a force, and it is real. And I think that a lot of the energy that went into Trump, maybe even a lot of the energy that went into Bernie, is going to go into this candidacy. And that is very interesting. And at the very least, it's going to be fun to watch.
Absolutely.
If
And,
I may
I
add
think
something, just a short thing.
Go ahead.
It's been a very precious moment. It always is a very precious moment and immensely helpful when someone with traction and a loud voice, figuratively speaking, like Andrew Yang, utters a radically different thing like UBI or something else than whatever mainstream media and mainstream politicians would want to talk about. I believe that's the main political impulse, if you want to call it that, and that's also the task of metapolitical institutions like NPI, what the different European states have, to pull or to kick people out of their comfort and make sure they realize that there are concepts which are radically different from this bland liberal democratic chowder they are fed every day by the media. And insofar, Yang has actually been very helpful in making UBI, at least for a short time, a topic that is actually discussed, because nobody else would. I mean, with Trump, it was radical enough to announce that a wall would be built. And UBI is something that is, as you said, Richard, is more radical by dimensions.
Right.
Well, it's worth mentioning, I think, that Yang definitely understands a lot of what both of you just said. I mean, he understands that, he said this explicitly, that he saw this problem, this enormous displacement that is being caused and has already been caused by automation. No one's talking about it. And the only way to get it talked about and get it moving forward is to kind of kick people through a presidential run. So I think he is realistic and savvy enough to know that he may just be the effect of his candidacy may just be to get this discussion rolling. And I've also heard him, I think, potentially kind of set up a role for himself in the eventual administration, whoever it is, because he has said what is needed is a czar of automation, someone to oversee all of this. And, I think you can see his campaign as, in some ways kind of an audition for that role. But none of it's going to matter because, gentlemen, I've come up with a winning strategy that no one has thought about before. And this is really going to transform our activity going forward. So I hope you're sitting down. We are going to infiltrate the GOP. Okay? We're going to insinuate ourselves into the GOP. We're going to do it by degrees, slowly. So you might have to kind of tone it down at first, right? Richard, you might have to wear a disguise, but we're gonna get in there. We're gonna slowly take over. Probably have to start with like college Republican groups, things like that. County Republican groups, but eventually we'll just work our way up the chain. And we'll stay quiet enough, and I'll give it like 30, 40 years maybe, and we'll be high enough. And then we will take over. We'll have the reins of power.
Come out and be like, surprise.
You see where I'm going with this? I mean, yes. It'll kind of be like the beginning and end of Inception, where like we don't know whether Leonardo DiCaprio's brain has been scrambled by all of this time in unreconstructed free dream space, and then the Japanese guy brings him back. But we'll still be there. I'll be passing all of these Wall Street policies. You'll see me, but the whole time I'll really be with you guys. Okay. All right, good stream, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, nothing more, nothing else needs to be said. Yes, I think we've basically sarcasm has ended. I think we've basically seen the beginning and end of this meme among the kind of young Zoomer millennial types. But it was not new. I think one of the things that annoyed me about this "let's infiltrate the GOP" meme is that I have been hearing this for years from paleocons, etc. I remember there was one instance where this rather kind of amusing character who spoke real briefly at an American Renaissance conference, who then 3 months later was summarily kicked out of his position helping out Nikki Haley in South Carolina. So he had infiltrated her campaign and was effectively stuffing envelopes and licking stamps and sending out things on behalf of Nikki Haley. So we had this, amusing character who at least expressed racialist sentiments, who was doing the busy work of horrible neoconservative candidates. It is just it's a bizarre strategy, to say the least. It is interesting that the GOP is in so many ways more hostile towards us than even the Democratic Party. You could call it the narcissism of small differences, if you want, but the GOP has a very strong immune system. They are not dumb. As much as we want to make fun of them, they are not dumb. They will recognize, target, and swiftly purge anyone who is not part of the agenda. I don't think that if infiltration were possible, it could never be done by someone like me. It could never be done by people who are a little bit lower or less well known than me. It would have to be done by people who have no trail whatsoever. And it would take effectively decades, apparently. And the moment that this person came out of the closet, so to speak, and announced that, this is what we're doing. We're restricting immigration. We're a white party. It's okay to be white. We're good with all this stuff. If this person were able to achieve power in the Republican Party, the big money would immediately exit, or this person would be absolutely crushed, and the GOP would go on an apology tour. It just simply is not going to happen. And if it could happen, it would take decades, and it would ultimately be ineffective. But at the end of the day, it's not so much about this, infiltrate the GOP as an actual strategy. It is a kind of fantasy, but I think more so it's a kind of intramural status signal that I have heard for my entire time in this movement, and it has been going on for decades from paleocons. It is basically someone who comes in there and says, oh, well, we have these outlandish dreamers who talk about the ethno-state or want to talk philosophy or have these big ideas or anti-system and so on. Well, we can't deal with them. We need to deal with boring, pragmatic minded people like myself, and that we're the ones who know how to get stuff done. We're the ones who know how to be effective. Now, again, from the outside world, those supposed pragmatists are viewed as essentially identical to, say, me or David Duke or whomever. Their strategies simply do not work. They've been tried. But they remain, and I think we're going to hear this again. We're going to hear this next year. We're going to hear this in 5 years. We're going to hear this in 10 years. It is basically people who want to engage in this kind of intramural status signaling. They go to our movement and they say, let's put aside our metapolitical ideals. Let's put aside our culture. Let's put aside people who are actually effective, who are actually talented. And therefore, get pushback, get media attention, become, dangerous figures on the scene, and let's put our resources towards these boring, talentless types. It is an ongoing intramural status signal where people will say, "I'll be your guy" within the system, and I'm generally speaking just sick of it.
Well, again, the fact that it simply hasn't worked, I think, is demonstrable. I mean, there was a period of time when I was younger where I was willing to entertain this a little bit. And I was willing to say, okay, I'm not able to mute myself. I'm not able to behave. I'm kind of, I would not be able to, kind of sit dutifully through, my Republican Party functions. But maybe somebody else is. And okay, let 1,000 flowers bloom. We're all going to pursue our different strategies. And I'm fine with that. I'm not fine with it anymore. And I do feel that people who propose this as a strategy need to be attacked at a strategic level. But overall, people who are attracted to it need to be bullied as much, if not more, than just straightforward conservatives. Just my take, just how I feel. I think, I mentioned this before we went live. The most interesting take a pretty true take I saw was from Matt Parrott on Twitter, where he pointed out that in this debate between so-called amnats and so-called wignats, which was meant as a disparaging term. I didn't even know what it meant until what it stood for until 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I didn't either until like 3 months ago.
I had to look it up at like Urban Dictionary or some crap like that. Anyways, their idea being, no, we can't do anything too pushy. There's room for us in the GOP and Conservatism Inc. If only we know how to take it and know how to behave in the right way. And you, Richard Spencer and company, clearly do not. So we're throwing you aside and we're going in. Well, these people went to CPAC. And every year past, they got kicked out. And the moment they got kicked out, they started insulting and trolling and bullying all the people that they were just telling us, we had to be polite to, and we had to kind of suck up to, and that we were, malignant because we didn't have, the patience and the ability to do it. So basically, they ended up adopting our strategy in the end, and now they're in essentially the same place as far as I can see.
They adopt our strategy in this really lame way. I mean,
and in a reflexive way, in a way where we're saying, this just is how it is, and you have to accept it, and you have to, be in that mind space the whole time. I mean, this is like a competition. If you're in an athletic competition, you can't rest. You can't let them walk around behind you. You really have to be going after them. You have to be aggressive. You have to be going after it. They, I think, reveal themselves because their strategy wasn't thought out at all. Just kind of reflexively, they get kicked out. And it's like, screw you guys. You're lame anyways. Well, yeah, they are lame. Like they're lame. They never can be made not lame. They're always going to be lame. And the only play is to say, yeah, these guys are lame. We're cool. And if you're cool, maybe you can hang out with us. Maybe not. Maybe you're not cool enough either.
Right. I mean, let me revisit history a little bit because this is anecdotal, but I think this will be interesting for people. So rewind to 2017. So we've had the Trump election. We had Hailgate and all this insane media coverage. We had the punch of Richard Spencer and on January 20th, 2017. So we had things like my Texas A&M event, where the alt-right was we were coming out, we were literally and figuratively on stage, speaking what we believe in and so on. And CPAC in February of 2017, I believe, maybe it was early March, doesn't matter. We're basically doing an alt-right panel. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to go to CPAC or not. And I was kind of two minds. I had certainly been to many CPACs previously, But there was this alt-right panel, and so I was saying, I think we actually have to be there. There's going to be a panel. There's going to therefore be a Q&A. They are talking about us directly. Why don't I'm going to go ask a question at this Q&A. I'm gonna confront them. Do they want to ask me a question? Let's do this. But I went to CPAC as a long time explicit, often hostile critic of conservatism. I had given speeches about how conservatism is wrong and that we need to move beyond it. My views were clear. I do not think that we need to infiltrate the GOP or the Conservatism Inc. or CPAC, whatever. I thought we had, via Trump, we could take an end run around them and that they would be displaced. It was a miraculous, in effect, failed vision, but it was ours. And so I went to CPAC of 2017, and I bought a ticket. At this panel where they all bashed the alt-right, they offered no insight whatsoever, no serious critique of the alt-right. They just simply said that we're wrong and we need to be conservatives. There was no Q&A at that panel, and so I wasn't able to ask a question. And so some people have become aware that I was there. I'm a recognizable guy. And I started talking with one journalist. I believe it was Michelle Goldberg, I believe her name, from the New York Times. Maybe she was from another place at that Slate at that point or something. And I started talking with her, and then another journalist came by, and then two more came by. And before we knew it, I was there giving a press conference. And I was talking about the alt-right. I was talking about what we care about and our ideals. And I was also being kind of funny. That was the origin of the Depeche Mode as the official band of the alt-right, which was obviously a kind of, a very personal joke, but it was just, a little bit of humor thrown out there. And we were making tons of headlines. We made dozens of headlines, and we were talking to dozens of reporters, and I was able to communicate our message really effectively. And I was thrown out eventually after we did about 30 minutes of this crazed impromptu press conference. And then I was thrown out, and I left, but it was what it was. It was something that I don't think could be repeated. It was a one-time thing. But it was an unequivocal expression of we are who we are. We are an insurgent force here. We're a hostile invading force in CPAC. And I thought it was fantastic. I knew it couldn't quite be repeated, but I thought it was fantastic. So then we have the American nationalists who basically hate people like me, who have denounced people like me, who have done everything they can to say, oh, we need to go in a totally different direction. And one of Patrick Casey's protocols within IE was that if you're friends with me, or if you go out to dinner with me or something, you're expelled from IE, because we're this little cult organization. And they went to CPAC not as a hostile invading army, but as basically as a group that promised to be wallpaper. We're so boring, no one will notice us. We're a little bit different than CPAC, but we're going to be able to, as Patrick Casey said, infiltrate the Republican Party, and we're going to come talk to people, and we're going to kind of be this, one new group within CPAC. And that, from what I could tell, I did some basic searches, that achieved nothing in terms of media exposure. There was no media scrum impromptu press conference that had any interest in them. There was effectively no reportage of it. There was maybe one or two articles. Nothing like what I achieved in 2017. And immediately after they were expelled from CPAC, they began claiming, oh no, see, what we were really doing was this new strategy where we're totally different. We're an alternative right, so to speak. and we're opposing CPAC. And it's like, that wasn't your strategy. I mean, it's fine to, I guess, recognize reality, but it's just also kind of bullshit to just, retroactively reinvent yourself. But the thing is, when they're trying to be Richard Spencer without Richard Spencer, and you can't do it, and they can't do it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it all seems very convenient and ad hoc to me. But Niels, what do you think? Are we being unfair to the AMNATs and to the infiltrationists? Do you have a perspective on this?
Oh well, I mean those parties in the US, I believe even more than in the old world, are to put it like Niklas Luhmann would probably put it, are closed systems. They are self-reliant and self-supporting, and trying to insert yourself as being crypto radically different into such a system would demand from you becoming what you are trying to fight. The real question is, do you leave your essence, your own identity behind on this way? Like if you try to gamble with the devil, it will probably not be the devil who changes in this process, but it will be yourself. So what will be left, and what will be the price? Because if you infiltrate the GOP, given it was possible, it would require from you to do years of GOP work, doing what you actually loathe and what you are actually trying to halt or to present a radical alternative to. And I don't believe infiltrating a more or less hostile political body is possible. And it strikes me as being one more symptom of this strange simulation disease dissident political figures find themselves in, that they wish to be superheroes or special agents or any other archetype that would be able to radically change things just by one snap of his finger or one radical action. And that's just not happening, not from within the system, and not by trying to play along with the system and change the rules of the game in some stealthy way while playing it.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think in a very simplistic and straightforward way, just acknowledge the GOP and its kind of conservative, mouthpieces or apologists. They respond not to their base, not to their followers. They respond to their donors, and there is no way to finesse around that. And then just as far as a branding thing, I mean, conservatism is crap. And we can't be more authentic crap than they are. I mean, if you come in and just try to be what they are instead of be who you are, you're just Pepsi to their Coke. And actually, that's way too flattering. Way too flattering to what you would be. You would be something radically off-brand and kind of confusing. You're just not going to fit in.
Right.
So
also,
I think we've seen that.
Craig, you and I know about a half dozen people who are more or less our age. I'm a little bit. I'm older than you are, but who are now in their 30s, who have been working within Conservative Inc. For the past decade, effectively, or at the very least 5 years. And have we seen any dividend from this? From these secret agents who are employed, getting 5-figure salaries, living in the Washington area, working in Conservatism Inc. I cannot point to a single thing that we have gained from this, that the alt-right has gained from this, or that our ideals have gained from this. I cannot point to a single thing. They are simply doing the busy work for conservatives. and they're never going to come out of the closet because that would jeopardize their careers. And they are not independent people of wealth. Therefore, they need that money. Understandably, I don't really begrudge them for that. They need their health care, their salaries. So I do not see the point of this. All I see when I see identitarians, alt-right types going to work for the conservative movement is that they become smaller people. They become less independent, and they ultimately, and this is the worst thing, is that they start to kind of psychologically change, and they start to believe their own bullshit, so to speak. And they become less radical, less interesting, smaller people. So I think there's a very strong argument to be made for just simply not going in there, not giving them your labor and your energy. You are ultimately feeding the system. They might be paying you 50 grand a year or whatever, but they're getting the good end of it. You know, they're getting your labor and your energy, and they're diminishing the labor and energy on our side. So I just think it's a absolutely terrible thing, and we've tried it. We have tried this, and we have seen what it results in. At some point, there is going to need to be a new strategy. Everyone talks about how I've talked explicitly over the past, say, 6 to 9 months. We might need our own political party. We might need quixotic campaigns, etc. And this is, this is so totally unpragmatic. It's not going to work, whatever. Well, maybe it won't. Maybe nothing is going to work. But this kind of thing, if done right, has not been tried. And it, at the very least, offers us the potential of being in control of institutions that might be smaller. But we're going to infiltrate the GOP. This has been tried. This has been tried by countless boomers for the last 40 years. The paleo.
What you described about kind of a subgroup of people of our generation. I've seen the same thing, and what we are trying may not work. But what they are trying will not work, and we've seen that.
Right.
And I won't belabor it, but perhaps the most depressing thing to me is that after having seen that it doesn't work and still being kind of stuck in the same place, not a single one of these people has stepped forward and said, I was willing to give this a try, but here's what I really am, and I'm just walking away from all of this. That would have a little bit of media play and effect, and it would have a moralizing effect on other people. But they don't do it; they're just going to stay where they are, and that's sad. But we move on.
Even when they're doxxed, they stay where they are.
There's
an interesting. I won't name names here, but there's a very interesting situation with someone who was a authentic identitarian at one point, who worked within the system. And he was doxxed not by the alt-right. He was doxxed by a conservative. The conservative immune system worked. It recognized an antibody, and it fought back viciously against this antibody and destroyed this person's career. Even after he was doxxed, he's the same conservative that we've been seeing for years on Twitter. It's unbelievable. And the conclusion that I draw from that is that there was actually a psychological effect. We believe that we can all be secret agents and that we can just lie to people. We can express things that we don't believe in and maybe have a little smirk on our face while we're expressing conservative ideology. But just the act of reiterating conservative slogans affects us psychologically. That we as humans, we want to say what we mean and mean what we say. And if we're not saying what we mean, we start meaning what we say in the sense that we start actually believing these things. There's a reason why religions almost always entail repetition of dogma. And just the psychological effect of young men going into the conservative movement, talking in that way, conversing in that way in public and in private, it has a psychological effect. You are turned into a conservative. And I guess the only people who wouldn't be are complete sociopaths who don't want to mean what they say and say what they mean. And so again, I've seen it. I've seen it. I don't need to see more. This isn't going to work. It has been tried. Let's please stop.
It's good advice. Conservatism, not even once. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Have we been overlooking any super chats?
Yes. Let's do the super chats, and then we can. We're about at 2 hours, so I think that's a good time. Right. We don't want to thoroughly bore our audience by doing one of these 5-hour Alex Jones streams.
Well,
that is.
The funny part is the super chats start pouring in once you start reading them, so we might see a few more after I get to the last one. Anyway,
all right.
Here is one from Frycorps for $50.
Thank you.
Do we need to start using the language of an oppressed minority? Use anti-Nordite, not anti-white. And Nordophobic equals the irrational fear that suggests any country with an overwhelmingly white population will eventually turn to violence against Jews and people of color.
I'm not sure that kind of thing is going to work. I know there's a person I've known for some time who goes by No White Guilt, who kind of pushes that anti-white meme, and I like him, and I'm not really opposed to him or to that meme, but I don't know. I'm not sure that's going to work as an analogy to anti-Semitism. I think the "it's okay to be white" is a much stronger thing, and that is just to we want a positive identity. That's what we need to build up before we can start attacking the people who are against us. We need to say it's okay to be who we are. We are this. We are something. So I think we need to. I think we should focus on a positive identity first, and that without that positive identity, all that kind of you're an anti-white stuff doesn't work. There's a reason why anti-Semitism is a thing, whereas anti-Euroism or whiteism is not, Caucasianism is not a thing. And that is that Jews have a firm sense of who they are, as a people and as a historical actor. So that's what I would say to that.
All right. The next one is from Flesh Plus Dust. He says, for $5, he says, Anning was egged because he had said the attack on New Zealand was caused by immigration and Islamic terrorism. He also is in a formal statement called it vigilantism in passing. Also, I hear government calls for more censorship of white nationalist rhetoric.
That's interesting. So that politician was actually pretty edgy saying those things. That's very interesting.
The next is... oh, go ahead.
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's going to be more censorship of white nationalist rhetoric. I don't doubt it.
All right. The next one is from Natural Order for $1. Yangism is a dead end, just like all political solutions are a dead end. If Trump proved anything, it is this. The system has a rabid hatred of us and will continue to silence, oppress, and replace us. We are not going to vote ourselves out of this mess. The next is from Hermes for $20. He says, we have no power in electoral politics. All Western governments are wholly owned by banks, and we know who owns them. But we are immensely powerful in the culture war. They cannot ignore us. We have to focus on cultural memes, not politics. Not policies, rather. And that's all
I largely agree. I largely agree. I do think that we can play politics in a kind of culture war way. And that was the great achievement in 2016, and it's to a large extent what's been achieved in this all too brief, Yang Gang phenomenon. And so actually Nils has a quote from Anning that he wanted to read out. Are you ready?
Are you there, Nils? There he is.
On the very day, I found found a tweet by, I believe, an Australian or a New Zealand from a Kiwi journalist who was pretty upset about this. I posted the link to this press release in the side chat. I don't know. Maybe Richard should read it out because most people are here to hear him speak. Do you see it?
Yes, I do. So the New Zealand mosque shooting. Following reports of multiple shootings at 2 mosques in New Zealand earlier today, Senator Fraser Anning has responded with strong condemnation. I am utterly opposed to any form of violence within our community, and I totally condemn the actions of the gunman, he said. Okay. However, whilst this kind of violent vigilantism can never be justified, that is interesting use of the word, being vigilant, a vigilante. What it highlights is the growing fear within our community, both in Australia and New Zealand, of the increasing Muslim presence. As always, left-wing politicians and the media will rush to claim that the causes of today's shootings lie with the gun laws or those who hold nationalistic views. And this is all cliched nonsense. The real cause of bloodshed on New Zealand streets today is the immigration program, which allowed Muslim fanatics to migrate to New Zealand in the first place. Let us be clear. While Muslims may have been the victims today, usually they are the perpetrators. Worldwide, Muslims are killing people in the name of their faith on an industrial scale. Wow, this is edgy. The entire religion of Islam is simply the violent ideology of a 6th century despot's masquerading as a religious leader, which justifies endless wars against anyone who opposes it and calls for the murder of unbelievers and apostates. The truth is that Islam is not like any other faith. It is the religious equivalent of fascism. We're getting into mid-2000s neocon stuff, but whatever.
Islamofascism.
Yeah. And just because the followers of the savage belief were not the killers in this instance does not make them blameless. Wow. As we read in Matthew 26:52, all they that take the sword shall perish by the sword. And those who follow a violent religion that calls on them to murder us cannot be surprised when someone takes them at their word and responds in kind. That is pretty strong stuff. I have to say, I agree with a lot of it. I don't agree with some of it, but that is interesting. I mean, that is a very bold statement by Fraser Anning.
Do we have any other super chats?
Not right now. I will let you guys know and put them in the side chat of the Hangout if we do.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, why don't we bring? Do you want to do some real quick hits? I don't know if we have time. I think we should probably bring this to a close soon. But we can do some.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next time we'll make sure we get to some quick hits.
We'll talk about Beto, the Beto phenomenon. Let's let Beto kind of let's let him do some stuff this week, and then we'll go into the meaning of Beto O'Rourke.
Sure. All right. Well, this was a great stream, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for everyone listening. Thank you especially to all of our super chatters. And the goal is to make this weekly. The goal is to kind of build this out, flesh it out, and just sort of put a little meat around the bones of this concept. And, have, I think, especially a setting in which Richard can offer a lot of good takes that I think we all welcome from him. All right.
Awesome. Talk to you guys soon.
There's one last super chat. I just put it in the side chat. Fourth Reich for $5. I think before anti-white, internal the mainstream, we need to meme the term white people, not middle-class Americans, not the forgotten America's white American Republicans need to be able to say we are the white party. That's all. Yeah, that's all. And do you want to play us out right now?
Yeah, let's play us out. Thank you to everyone. Definitely thanks to Nils and Craig. And this was a lot of fun. I think this is the beginning of something good.
All right.
It's been a pleasure.
Talk to you soon.
Talk to you.
There is no more identity, there are no more nations. There is no more meaning, and there is no more history. It's all been solved. We'll all be little citizens of our nation states that are effectively abstract entities that have no connection to history, and we'll all just buy stuff from the internet. That is the end of history. That is something that seemed almost plausible at some point in my life. But there comes a time when a people bites back. There comes a time when something, this undifferentiated individualist mass goes so far into nihilism, goes so far into the destruction of meaning and identity, that we have to pull ourselves out of it by the scruff of our own collar. You're given this black cloud that hangs over you. You're given this black cloud of slavery. What is that black cloud but a guilt trip to weigh you down, to prevent you from achieving greatness, to prevent you from becoming something bigger than you are, to prevent you from embracing your family, to prevent us from becoming heroes, from re-entering history and changing the world and creating a new world in our image, a new world of beauty, a new world of power, a new world that can express what is in our soul. Not that black cloud that hangs over all of us, that black cloud of pain and sin and weakness. We have the power to embrace a new world that is the meaning of world history, that is our destiny of where we are traveling to a greater achievement of consciousness, a greater achievement of beauty, a greater achievement of power and intelligence and understanding of science. That black cloud is weighing us down. That black cloud is turning our world into a living hell. It is turning our world into a hell of unhappiness, of loneliness, turning our world into a world of death. You are a white person. You are part of the story of Europe. You have a deep connection with Rome. You have a deep connection with Athens. You have a deep connection with Byzantium, with this whole world that's been ripped away from you, and instead they substituted some disgusting bullshit football game.